Were old Hollywood's wildest stars truly controlled by endless desire, or did studios turn every private mistake into a permanent scandal? Behind the polished premieres were secret marriages, public betrayals, forbidden romances, and shocking double standards. This countdown follows documented relationships, memoirs, biographies, and public scandals while separating evidence from gossip that grew in Hollywood's shadows. Before we uncover the first name, subscribe for more forgotten stories from classic Hollywood. Number 45. Mamie Van Doren. Long before celebrities managed their reputations through social media, this platinum blonde rebel understood how much attention a daring image could attract. Mamie Van Doren was promoted as one of Hollywood's major blonde symbols, often compared with Marilyn Monroe and Jane Mansfield. Yet she refused to disappear quietly when the studio system began losing interest. Her personal life included 5 marriages, and her relationship with baseball player Bo Belinsky became part of her public legend. Over the years, Van Doren also discussed Hollywood romance with unusual openness, helping build an image of a woman who followed her own desires rather than studio rules. But that does not prove she suffered from uncontrollable behavior. Much of the label came from publicity photographs, revealing costumes, bold interviews, and a refusal to pretend that actresses had no private lives. Hollywood sold her as dangerous and then judged her for successfully playing the role. Mamie survived the era, told her own story, and refused to let gossip writers have the final word. Number 44. Zsa Zsa Gabor. Few women could turn a marriage certificate into a headline quite like this Hungarian-born socialite and actress. Zsa Zsa Gabor became almost as famous for her husbands as she was for her films, jewelry, gowns, and unforgettable television appearances. 9 marriages are generally associated with her name, although one union was later annulled. Her husbands included hotel businessman Conrad Hilton, actor George Sanders, and Frederick Prinz von Anhalt. Instead of hiding the pattern, Gabor transformed it into part of her comedy. She joked about divorce, money, romance, and men before audiences could use those subjects against her. That confidence created the impression of endless romantic appetite, but marriages alone reveal little about anyone's private behavior. Zsa Zsa's real talent was understanding celebrity before celebrity culture became an industry. She turned society gossip into a career, and made every separation feel like another glamorous chapter. The public may have laughed at the number of husbands, yet she remained in control of the joke. What looked like romantic chaos was also careful image-making by a woman who knew scandal could keep her famous. If you enjoy Hollywood history without the studio-approved filter, subscribe to the channel now. Your support helps us keep separating documented truth from recycled gossip. Number 43. Shelley Winters. Behind the loud personality and fearless humor was a woman who refused to pretend her private life had been perfectly respectable. Shelley Winters began her career as a glamorous blonde before transforming herself into one of Hollywood's strongest character actresses. 4 marriages formed only part of her complicated romantic history. Her husbands included Mac Paul Mayer, Vittorio Gassman, Anthony Franciosa, and Jerry DeFord, whom she married shortly before her death. In memoirs and interviews, Winters wrote openly about famous men, failed relationships, jealousy, and the emotional confusion surrounding Hollywood romance. Some of her stories were told with theatrical exaggeration, making it difficult to separate every fact from her talent for entertaining an audience. That uncertainty matters. A witty memoir is not the same thing as a medical record, and colorful storytelling should not become evidence of a disorder. Winters survived an industry that expected actresses to remain young, beautiful, and silent. Instead, she aged publicly, won major awards, and discussed parts of her life other stars tried desperately to conceal. Number 42. Joan Collins. By the time she played the commanding Alexis Carrington on Dynasty, audiences already believed Joan Collins understood power, glamour, and romantic warfare. Her screen image seemed to follow her everywhere, especially when newspapers discussed her 5 marriages. The actress married Maxwell Reed, Anthony Newley, Ron Cass, Peter Holm, and Percy Gibson. Several unions ended painfully and publicly, giving the press years of dramatic material. Collins later wrote candidly about marriage, betrayal, celebrity culture, and the pressure placed on women whose private choices became entertainment. Yet the idea that numerous marriages equal uncontrollable desire is an obvious simplification. Some relationships lasted years. Others involved disappointment, professional pressure, or serious emotional conflict. The number alone says nothing about what happened behind closed doors. Collins also faced a familiar Hollywood contradiction. Producers wanted her to appear sophisticated and desirable, but tabloids criticized her whenever she seemed to live with the independence associated with that image. Her real story concerned survival and reinvention far more than any insulting label created to sell newspapers. Number 41. Diana Dors. British cinema presented her as its answer to Marilyn Monroe, complete with platinum hair, dramatic curves, expensive cars, and a private life newspapers followed obsessively. Diana Dors learned early that scandal could create opportunities, but the same attention eventually trapped her inside a reputation she could not fully control. 3 marriages, glamorous parties, turbulent relationships, and carefully staged publicity helped establish her as Britain's most provocative screen personality. Even respected accounts of her career acknowledged that the public often discussed her private life as much as her acting. The problem was that Dors possessed considerably more talent than her image suggested. She delivered strong dramatic performances, especially when filmmakers allowed her to move beyond the exaggerated blonde stereotype. Nevertheless, headlines repeatedly returned to romance, money, clothing, and rumored behavior. Calling her uncontrollable was easier than admitting she had participated in building a marketable persona. She could be reckless, ambitious, vulnerable, and intelligent at the same time. The mythology was real, but it was also a commercial product, created by Dors, filmmakers, photographers, and a public eager for scandal. Number 40. Lupe Velez. Every argument, reconciliation, and dramatic public appearance strengthened the nickname Mexican Spitfire. Lupe Velez became known for explosive comedy, powerful emotions, and romantic relationships that seemed as theatrical as her movies. Her romance with Gary Cooper attracted enormous attention, partly because their temperaments and backgrounds appeared so different. Later, her turbulent marriage to Olympic swimmer and actor Johnny Weissmuller became another heavily publicized chapter. Their disagreements reportedly fascinated newspapers, which transformed private conflict into serialized entertainment. That image encouraged audiences to view Velez as a woman ruled entirely by passion, yet her screen personality was deliberately exaggerated. Studios benefited from presenting her as fiery, jealous, unpredictable, and impossible to contain. The real woman was also an ambitious performer, navigating racial stereotypes and limited opportunities. Her romances were public, but they do not prove the condition, later gossip attached to her. Instead, Velez demonstrates how Hollywood could turn cultural prejudice, comedy, and ordinary relationship problems into a permanent caricature. Number 39. Pola Negri. Before Talking Pictures created modern celebrity culture, this Polish-born silent film star had already shown Hollywood how romantic scandal could dominate international news. Pola Negri's dark beauty and intense performances established her as one of cinema's original screen vamps. Her reported associations with Charlie Chaplin and Rudolph Valentino became major stories. When Valentino died, Negri's emotional public mourning attracted enormous attention and generated debate over the true nature of their relationship. She also married more than once, including unions connected to European nobility. Audiences struggled to separate the actress from the dangerous women she portrayed. Because she played characters who used desire as power, newspapers treated every relationship as confirmation that Negri behaved exactly like her screen roles. In reality, much of her reputation emerged from silent-era publicity, when studios routinely invented or exaggerated romance to sell tickets. Her life was undoubtedly dramatic, but the image of endless appetite was inseparable from the vamp character Hollywood needed her to embody. Number 38. Gloria Swanson. Success arrived so early and dramatically that ordinary limits seemed unable to contain this silent screen queen. Gloria Swanson became one of Hollywood's first international fashion icons, living with a level of luxury that made her private decisions part of the spectacle. Several marriages marked her long life, and her relationship with businessman and producer Joseph P. Kennedy became one of Hollywood's most discussed affairs. Swanson later wrote about important parts of her career and personal history, helping historians understand how closely romance, finance, and filmmaking could become connected. Her glamorous image encouraged the public to treat every marriage as evidence of excess. However, Swanson was also a producer and businesswoman working in an industry where powerful men regularly mixed personal relationships with professional control. Later generations remembered her through Sunset Boulevard, where she played a forgotten silent star trapped inside her own legend. The irony was powerful. Swanson understood celebrities' dangers because she had helped invent its rules. Her marriages created headlines, but ambition and independence defined her more accurately than any medicalized insult. Number 37. Jean Harlow. At only 26, this original blonde bombshell had already experienced more public attention and personal upheaval than many stars endured in an entire lifetime. Jean Harlow's screen image was playful, confident, and daring, but her private world was far less carefree. She married 3 times. Her second husband, producer Paul Byrne, died under circumstances that created a sensational press storm, while her later relationship with actor William Powell became one of the most important attachments of her final years. Newspapers continually connected her to co-stars and powerful men. Because Harlow's characters spoke boldly and displayed desire without apology, viewers assumed she must behave the same way away from the camera. Studios rarely discouraged that assumption when it helped ticket sales. Yet biographies describe a young woman pressured by family, publicity, demanding schedules, and the expectations placed on a major star. The seductive image was partly performance and partly studio construction. Harlow may have lived unconventionally, but the legend often ignored how little control she truly possessed. Number 36. Carole Lombard. Nothing about this fast-talking comedy star suggested that she wanted to behave like Hollywood's idea of a quiet, obedient wife. Carole Lombard was funny, direct, independent, and comfortable socializing in ways that challenged expectations placed on respectable women. Her first marriage to William Powell ended without the kind of lasting public warfare common in Hollywood. Later, her relationship with Clark Gable developed, while he was separated but not yet divorced from his second wife, creating legal and publicity complications before Lombard and Gable finally married in 1939. Their marriage became one of classic Hollywood's most celebrated love stories, cut short by Lombard's death in a plane crash in 1942. That record hardly supports the wildest labels attached to her. Instead, her inclusion shows how easily an actress could be branded simply for attending parties, speaking openly, wearing daring clothes, or beginning a relationship outside a perfectly convenient timeline. Lombard's strongest rebellion was not endless romance. It was refusing to perform artificial innocence. Number 35. Bette Davis. Fire seemed to follow this actress both on the screen and in private. Bette Davis fought studios, directors, husbands, co-stars, and almost anyone who attempted to control her career. That combative reputation made every romantic story surrounding her appear believable, even when the full facts remained private. 4 marriages ended through divorce, separation, or death. Biographical accounts have also discussed relationships involving director William Wyler, businessman Howard Hughes, and actor George Brent. Her connection with Wyler was particularly important because their professional partnership produced some of her strongest performances, even as personal tension complicated their work. Davis did not fit Hollywood's preferred image of feminine softness. She smoked, argued, demanded better scripts, and openly placed acting above domestic peace. When a male star behaved that way, he was called dedicated. When Davis did it, newspapers often treated her as emotionally dangerous. Her private life was certainly turbulent. Yet repeated conflict is not proof of uncontrollable physical desire. Much of Davis's romantic difficulty appears connected to ambition, loneliness, competing careers, and her refusal to surrender authority. The most revealing feature of her story is the standard used against her. Hollywood forgave male actors for maintaining several relationships at once, while a powerful actress with 4 marriages could be portrayed as fundamentally abnormal. Davis was complicated, sometimes destructive, and frequently difficult. She was also one of the greatest performers American cinema produced. Number 34. Ingrid Bergman. A single relationship nearly destroyed the career of a woman Hollywood had promoted as naturally pure. Ingrid Bergman's performances in Casablanca, Gaslight, and The Bells of St. Mary's created an image of intelligence, dignity, and moral seriousness. Then director Roberto Rossellini entered her life. Both were married when their professional admiration became romantic. Bergman became pregnant while still legally married to Petter Lindstrom, and the news caused outrage in the United States. Politicians condemned her, religious groups protested, and sections of the entertainment industry treated her as though she had betrayed the entire country. The reaction demonstrated how little tolerance existed for a female star who contradicted her screen image. Male actors had maintained affairs for decades without facing anything comparable. Bergman, however, temporarily lost her place in Hollywood and worked mainly in Europe. Her marriage to Rossellini eventually ended, and she later married producer Lars Schmidt. Over time, American audiences welcomed her back, and her talent became impossible to dismiss. Calling Bergman uncontrollable ignores the evidence. The scandal centered on one major relationship, not a documented pattern of compulsive behavior. What made the affair historic was not its uniqueness but the punishment. Studios had sold Bergman as morally perfect, and the public reacted with fury when she revealed herself to be human. Number 33, Judy Garland. Applause surrounded her from childhood, but dependable affection remained painfully difficult to find. Judy Garland entered the studio system as a teenager and became one of the most valuable performers at MGM. Behind the musical numbers, however, executives controlled her appearance, schedule, food, medication, and personal relationships. 5 marriages reflected a lifelong search for security. Her husbands were David Rose, Vincente Minnelli, Sidney Luft, Mark Herron, and Mickey Deans. Some relationships brought professional support. Others involved financial pressure, conflict, separation, or disappointment. Biographies also describe serious romances that did not lead to marriage. It would be cruel to treat that history as entertainment without considering the environment surrounding it. Garland's childhood had been consumed by work. Studio executives interfered in decisions that other young women made privately, leaving her with fame but little preparation for ordinary adult stability. Newspapers repeatedly presented her marriages as evidence that she was chaotic. Yet many people around her benefited financially from her talent, while criticizing the coping mechanisms and emotional dependence created by years of exploitation. Garland's life was undeniably turbulent, but desire was not the central tragedy. She wanted love, reassurance, and a home that could compete with the audience's affection. Each new marriage appeared to promise that stability. When it failed, the public watched the collapse as though it were another performance. Number 32, Tallulah Bankhead. Even in an era filled with carefully rehearsed personalities, this Alabama-born stage star seemed determined to shock every room she entered. Tallulah Bankhead spoke in a deep voice, told daring stories, attended legendary parties, and treated social rules as suggestions rather than commands. Her only marriage, to actor John Emery, lasted several years before ending in divorce. Nevertheless, Bankhead's reputation extended far beyond the official record. Friends, memoirists, and later biographers connected her with numerous companions, while stories involving both men and women became part of her legend. Some claims are more reliable than others. Bankhead was a brilliant storyteller who understood that outrageous anecdotes increased her fame. People around her also repeated stories, because attaching themselves to Tallulah's private world made them appear interesting. What is certain is that she rejected the performance of modesty expected from women. She discussed pleasure, alcohol, politics, theater, and personal freedom, with a bluntness that male entertainers were permitted, but women were not. That openness allowed later writers to place almost any rumor around her name. Bankhead probably lived more freely than many contemporaries, but her legend grew through repetition until the character became larger than the available evidence. Calling her a nymphomaniac, therefore reveals more about cultural discomfort than medical reality. She was outspoken, theatrical, self-destructive at times, and unwilling to apologize. Hollywood and Broadway converted those qualities into a mythology of limitless appetite, because freedom itself seems scandalous when practiced by a woman. Number 31, Mae West. Censorship boards considered her dangerous long before Hollywood allowed her to become a movie star. Mae West wrote plays, created characters, challenged restrictions, and built comedy around a woman who understood desire better than the nervous men surrounding her. A youthful marriage to vaudeville performer Frank Wallace remained hidden for years, partly because acknowledging a husband would have complicated the independent persona she presented publicly. Later proposals and relationships attracted attention, but West guarded much of her private life carefully. What truly frightened moral campaigners was not the number of men in her life. It was control. Her movie characters chose their companions, delivered the cleverest lines, and rarely suffered the shame traditionally assigned to sexually confident women. West also fought over scripts, and refused to surrender the comic identity that had made her successful on stage. Censors removed lines, altered scenes, and eventually helped restrict the kind of material she could perform. Even then, audiences understood what her jokes suggested. Rumors involving cast members and younger men followed her for decades. Some were encouraged by West herself, because mystery protected the brand. Yet the character and the woman should not be treated as identical. Her significance rests in the fact that she turned female desire into authority. The men in her stories were not conquerors. They were applicants being evaluated. That reversal made West appear more dangerous than stars, whose real private behavior was far less restrained. Number 30. Clara Bow. No star suffered more brutally from the idea that a screen image must be a confession. Clara Bow became the it girl of the 1920s, representing modern youth, energy, romance, and independence. Audiences adored her natural acting, but newspapers soon treated her life as public property. Bow had relationships before marrying actor and politician Rex Bell, yet the most outrageous stories about her were frequently unsupported. A former assistant became involved in a legal dispute that exposed private information and encouraged sensational publications to print lurid claims. Rumors expanded until people repeated them as established history. The scale of the gossip mattered more than its accuracy. Bow came from poverty and lacked the polished social background of many stars. Her accent, emotions, friendships, and working-class origins made her vulnerable to people who considered her successful but not respectable. Hollywood had marketed Bow as the embodiment of attraction. Once public taste shifted, the same qualities were used to humiliate her. Tales of enormous parties and impossible numbers of partners survived because they were shocking, not because reliable evidence proved them. Her health and confidence declined under the pressure. Sound films created additional anxiety, and she eventually stepped away from acting. Clara Bow was not destroyed by desire. She was damaged by a publicity system that discovered it could profit twice from a woman, first by selling her freedom, then by punishing her for appearing free. Number 29. Marlene Dietrich. Marriage did not prevent this German-born icon from constructing one of Hollywood's most unconventional private arrangements. Marlene Dietrich remained legally married to Rudolf Sieber until his death, but biographies describe a relationship in which both understood that other attachments existed. Dietrich formed close relationships with famous men and women, although the evidence surrounding individual names varies. What cannot be disputed is the way she challenged conventional gender presentation. Her tailored suits, controlled voice, screen authority, and willingness to perform attraction without obvious submission made her unlike almost every other major actress. The public interpreted that independence as proof that no boundary applied to her. Yet Dietrich protected many details and carefully managed the mythology surrounding her. Mystery was professionally useful. The less audiences knew, the more they imagined. Her image also carried political significance. She rejected the Nazi regime, became an American citizen, supported Allied troops, and used her celebrity during the Second World War. Those achievements often received less popular attention than speculation about her private life. Dietrich certainly rejected traditional monogamous expectations, but an agreed arrangement is not automatically a disorder. The label placed on her reflects the difficulty society had accepting a woman who separated marriage, companionship, desire, and professional identity. She understood that people were watching, and gave them a performance sophisticated enough to remain fascinating decades later. The private reality was complicated. The public legend was intentionally irresistible. Number 28. Hedy Lamarr. Being described as the world's most beautiful woman became both an advantage and a prison. Hedy Lamarr arrived in Hollywood after escaping a deeply controlling first marriage in Europe. Her appearance and the controversy surrounding the film Ecstasy shaped the way American audiences viewed her before most had seen her speak. 6 marriages followed across her lifetime. Her romantic history included a well-documented association with Howard Hughes, who admired both her beauty and technical curiosity. Yet Hollywood consistently treated Lamarr as decoration, despite her intelligence and interest in invention. During the Second World War, she worked with composer George Antheil on a frequency-hopping communication concept designed to resist enemy interference. The invention did not make her famous at the time. Photographs, marriages, and gossip remained easier for the press to sell. That imbalance explains why Lamarr was repeatedly portrayed as a woman defined by men. A marriage failed, and the story became further evidence of instability. A relationship began, and it confirmed the seductive image created by filmmakers. Her life was complicated, and she sometimes made impulsive decisions, but nothing about 6 marriages establishes a clinical condition. Lamarr's deeper frustration came from being celebrated for a face, while her intellectual contribution remained overlooked. The industry wanted her to represent desire, not possess ideas of her own. The persistent private life label helped maintain that limitation by reducing a creative, restless person to the attention she received from men. Number 27. Joan Crawford. Ambition frightened people when it appeared this openly. Joan Crawford rose from an unstable childhood to become one of Hollywood's most recognizable stars, controlling her appearance, publicity, career choices, and professional relationships with extraordinary determination. 4 marriages shaped her public history: Douglas Fairbanks Jr., Franchot Tone, Philip Terry, and Pepsi-Cola executive Alfred Steele. Her long, complicated association with Clark Gable also became one of classic Hollywood's best-known affairs. They shared powerful chemistry on screen, and accounts describe a relationship that continued in different forms while both navigated other commitments. Crawford's romantic reputation cannot be separated from her drive for professional survival. She understood that stars could be replaced quickly and constantly reinvented herself, from silent-era dancer to glamorous leading lady and later dramatic actress. That level of control created enemies. Stories about Crawford often grew darker with each retelling, especially after her death. Some accusations remain heavily disputed, while others are supported by multiple accounts. Responsible history must distinguish between them. Her relationships were numerous enough to feed gossip, but the word used in this title still provides no meaningful explanation. Crawford sought affection, status, security, excitement, and professional advantage at different moments. Motives shared by countless men who were never medicalized for them. The studio system encouraged stars to use relationships strategically while pretending romance was always pure. Crawford simply played the game with visible intensity. Hollywood admired that intensity when it earned money and condemned it when she tried to exercise power independently. Number 26. Lana Turner. The discovery story was almost too perfect. A beautiful teenager supposedly noticed at a soda counter and transformed into a star. Whether simplified by publicity or not, that origin helped turn Lana Turner into an object of fascination before she had enough experience to control the attention. 7 marriages became the statistic repeated most often about her. Her relationship with Tyrone Power also produced intense interest because both were major stars and existing commitments complicated the situation. Later, the death of Johnny Stompanato inside Turner's home created one of Hollywood's most sensational legal and tabloid events, although her daughter Cheryl Crane said she acted to protect her mother. Turner's screen image made every development appear inevitable. In films such as The Postman Always Rings Twice, she represented dangerous attraction, and the public assumed the character revealed the woman. Yet the pattern also suggests repeated attempts to find safety and permanence. Some husbands were controlling, other unions were brief or poorly matched. Fame meant that each mistake became a national story. Reducing Turner to a provocative label erases the fear, manipulation, career pressure, and domestic instability surrounding several relationships. She could make reckless choices, but recklessness is not the same as a medical condition. The fascination continues because Turner's life seemed written like film noir: beauty, money, secrecy, jealousy, and a fatal confrontation. Hollywood transformed that resemblance into proof, forgetting that real people are not required to follow the logic of their screen roles. Number 25. Rita Hayworth. Millions believed they knew her because they had seen Gilda remove a glove. Rita Hayworth's transformation from Margarita Cancino into an international symbol required hairline changes, styling, publicity, and careful studio management. The finished image was unforgettable, but the distance between the image and the woman became painful. 5 marriages connected her with very different worlds. Her husbands included actor and director Orson Welles, Prince Ali Khan, singer Dick Hames, and producer James Hill. Each marriage attracted attention, and the union with Ali Khan turned Hayworth into a subject of global society news. The public treated these relationships as proof that she lived with the confidence of her screen characters. Privately, accounts describe a shy woman who struggled with insecurity, control, and the expectation that she remain permanently glamorous. Hayworth famously expressed the painful gap between Gilda and herself. Men expected the fantasy and were disappointed by the real person. That conflict helps explain why relationships repeatedly failed. A partner could fall in love with the image before discovering the woman had needs, fears, and limits the image never displayed. Her story also contains serious childhood exploitation that should not be turned into scandalous entertainment. Early experiences likely shaped her search for protection and complicated her ability to trust. Hayworth was desired by millions, but being desired is not the same as possessing endless desire. Her tragedy was that Hollywood made attraction her identity and then left her to manage the consequences alone. Number 24. Ava Gardner. Freedom mattered more to this North Carolina-born star than the security Hollywood repeatedly offered her. Ava Gardner arrived with extraordinary beauty and limited acting experience, but she gradually developed into a compelling performer whose private life became almost impossible to separate from her public identity. 3 famous marriages created a dramatic progression. Mickey Rooney was the youthful first husband, bandleader Artie Shaw the intellectual and often difficult second, and Frank Sinatra the overwhelming third. Gardner and Sinatra's relationship involved attraction, jealousy, professional pressure, separations, reconciliations, and constant newspaper attention. She also formed other relationships, but later accounts frequently rely on stories told years afterward. Gardner herself possessed a sharp sense of humor and could contribute to her own legend, making every anecdote sound larger than life. Unlike actresses who carefully defended a respectable image, she often appeared unwilling to apologize. That attitude encouraged journalists to interpret independence as appetite. Traveling, drinking, arguing, and choosing companions became parts of one convenient story. Ava could never be satisfied. The evidence shows something more complex. She resisted control, including control from husbands. She wanted emotional intensity but also space, 2 desires that can be difficult to maintain inside a famous marriage. Gardner's life was not a morality lesson. It was the story of a woman who became a global symbol before deciding what she wanted that symbol to mean. The relationships were real. The diagnosis was not. Number 23. Marilyn Monroe. No woman in Hollywood history has been surrounded by more invented intimacy. Marilyn Monroe's image became so powerful that strangers claimed relationships, secret knowledge, and private access long after her death. The more famous she became, the less control she seemed to have over her own story. 3 marriages are firmly documented: James Dougherty, baseball legend Joe DiMaggio, and playwright Arthur Miller. Each represented a different possible future: ordinary domestic life, celebrity partnership, and intellectual companionship. None provided lasting stability. Other alleged affairs, especially involving powerful political figures, have been repeated for decades. Some claims contain supporting testimony. Others depend on contradictory memories, questionable documents, or stories published after key witnesses had died. Treating every rumor as fact does not honor Monroe. It merely continues the exploitation. Her screen performances projected playful confidence, but friends and biographers described insecurity, professional ambition, and a serious desire to improve as an actress. She studied, challenged studios, formed her own production company, and fought for better material. The Nymphomaniac label was especially useful to people who wanted to reduce her achievements. It converted vulnerability into availability and made every man's claim sound believable. Monroe's life contained relationships and mistakes, but the evidence does not justify a clinical judgment. What it proves is that Hollywood created a fantasy so profitable that the real woman almost disappeared behind it. Even today, people often discuss who may have possessed Marilyn rather than what Marilyn was trying to create for herself. Number 22. Elizabeth Taylor. 8 marriages to 7 husbands made this violet-eyed star the obvious symbol of Hollywood romance. Elizabeth Taylor grew up inside the film industry, became famous as a child, and entered adulthood under constant public observation. Every marriage was treated as both personal drama and international entertainment. Her husbands included hotel heir Nicky Hilton, actor Michael Wilding, producer Mike Todd, singer Eddie Fisher, actor Richard Burton, politician John Warner, and construction worker Larry Fortensky. She married Burton twice, creating one of the most famous love stories and media storms of the 20th century. The affair began during the production of Cleopatra, while both Taylor and Burton were married to other people. Photographs and reports transformed their relationship into a global scandal. Religious leaders, politicians, and newspapers condemned them, yet audiences continued buying tickets to watch the couple together. Taylor never pretended that the history was tidy. She loved intensely, made commitments repeatedly, and sometimes returned to relationships after discovering that separation had not ended the attachment. Still, 8 marriages do not prove uncontrollable behavior. Taylor often pursued marriage rather than avoiding it, suggesting a strong belief in commitment, even when the results were unstable. Her later life also demonstrated extraordinary loyalty and courage through AIDS activism, fundraising, and support for friends when many public figures remained silent. The romantic record created headlines, but it represents only one part of a far larger legacy. Number 21. Jane Mansfield. Every flashbulb appeared to become part of the performance. Jane Mansfield understood publicity with almost scientific precision. She wore dramatic clothing, staged photographs, created memorable entrances, and encouraged comparisons with Marilyn Monroe while developing a louder, more comic version of blonde glamour. 3 marriages shaped her public life: Paul Mansfield, bodybuilder and actor Mickey Hargitay, and filmmaker Matt Cimber. Relationships and rumored affairs filled newspapers, while her home, clothing, and family life were presented as extensions of a carefully maintained celebrity brand. That strategy produced fame but limited professional respect. Mansfield had real comic ability and theatrical experience, yet producers increasingly treated her as a publicity attraction rather than an actress. Every photograph reinforced the belief that her personality consisted entirely of physical display. Later accounts have expanded her private history, sometimes depending on recollections published long after her death. The most sensational versions should therefore be treated cautiously. Mansfield's behavior often challenged the idea that respectable motherhood and glamorous performance could exist together. She appeared with her children, discussed family life, and continued presenting herself as a romantic symbol. The combination confused a culture that preferred women to fit into only one category. Her tragic death at 34 froze the image in place. She never received the decades necessary to revise her reputation, write a detailed account, or show audiences what might have followed. The famous appetite surrounding Jane Mansfield was partly romantic, but it was also an appetite for attention in an industry where disappearing could end a career overnight. Number 20. Vivien Leigh. The romance appeared as grand and tragic as anything either performer created on stage. Vivien Leigh and Laurence Olivier met while both were married to other people, formed a relationship, and eventually became Britain's most celebrated acting couple. Their marriage combined intense artistic admiration with long separations, professional competition, emotional conflict, and Leigh's serious health struggles. She won Academy Awards for Gone with the Wind and A Streetcar Named Desire, yet the pressure surrounding her private life often became as consuming as her work. After the marriage deteriorated, Leigh formed a long relationship with actor Jack Merivale, who remained with her during her final years. That history involves major emotional attachments, not evidence of limitless or indiscriminate behavior. Nevertheless, gossip surrounding Leigh expanded, because her beauty and performances invited comparison with unstable characters. Reports of affairs became connected with accounts of her bipolar illness, creating a deeply unfair suggestion that mental health symptoms made every private allegation believable. Responsible storytelling must keep those issues separate. A psychiatric condition should never be used as proof of a sexual claim, and romantic mistakes should not become evidence of illness without proper diagnosis. Leigh could be impulsive, emotionally intense, and difficult during periods of crisis. She was also disciplined enough to deliver some of cinema and theater's most demanding performances. Her place in this countdown reflects Hollywood mythology, not medical certainty. The public saw beauty, brilliance, illness, and a famous affair, then combined them into a simplified character. The real life was far more vulnerable and complicated. Number 19. Laurence Olivier. Respectability protected him in ways it never protected the woman beside him. Laurence Olivier became a symbol of British theatrical greatness, performing Shakespeare with extraordinary authority and building an international film career. Yet his private history contained the same complicated choices that attracted harsher judgment when associated with actresses. His first marriage was to Jill Esmond. During that union, he and Vivien Leigh began the relationship that eventually led both to divorce their spouses and marry each other. Their partnership became professionally legendary, but personally unstable. After separating from Leigh, Olivier married actress Joan Plowright, with whom he built a family and remained until his death. Later biographies have discussed other aspects of his private life, but some allegations remain debated and should not be presented as settled fact. The important issue is how Olivier's reputation absorbed romantic controversy. His affair with Leigh became evidence of overwhelming love, artistic passion, and tragic destiny. Leigh's behavior, by comparison, was more likely to be interpreted as instability. That contrast demonstrates the gendered nature of the title's label. A powerful male actor could move from one marriage to another while maintaining an image of seriousness. A woman with similar history risked being reduced to appetite. Olivier was not simply protected because he was male. National prestige, theatrical authority, awards, and institutional influence also shaped how journalists described him. His professional identity remained larger than his relationships. For many actresses in this countdown, the relationship became the identity. For Olivier, romance became only an interesting chapter inside a celebrated career. Number 18. Cary Grant. Perfect tailoring and effortless charm concealed a private life filled with uncertainty. Cary Grant became Hollywood's ideal sophisticated man, yet 5 marriages suggest that maintaining intimacy was far harder than performing romance on screen. His wives were Virginia Cherrill, Barbara Hutton, Betsy Drake, Diane Cannon, and Barbara Harris. Each relationship unfolded under different circumstances, and Grant's early childhood trauma, including the disappearance of his mother into an institution without his knowledge, has often been discussed as a source of lifelong insecurity. His attraction to Sophia Loren during the production of The Pride and the Passion also became a major story. Loren ultimately married Carlo Ponti, while Grant's feelings reportedly continued beyond the film. Another subject follows every discussion of Grant: his long friendship and shared home with actor Randolph Scott. Some writers interpret the relationship romantically. Others argue that available evidence does not establish that conclusion. Certainty would require information neither man publicly supplied. Grant's case demonstrates why labels based on rumor are unreliable. 5 marriages are documented. A relationship with Loren has substantial support. Other claims remain contested. The polished screen lover was an invention created by Archie Leach, the insecure English boy who became Cary Grant. His repeated relationships may reveal a search for trust and family, rather than endless physical appetite. Audiences wanted to believe Grant could understand every woman. Privately, he often appeared unable to understand how to create the lasting emotional security he wanted for himself. Number 17. Montgomery Clift. Silence created the space in which other people wrote their own stories. Montgomery Clift was one of Hollywood's most influential dramatic actors, bringing emotional sensitivity and vulnerability to leading roles that previously demanded simpler masculine confidence. He never married, and he guarded his private life. Later biographies have discussed relationships and his sexuality, but accounts vary in detail and reliability. Some people who knew him wrote publicly, others remained silent. The result is a record filled with interpretation. Clift's screen presence intensified the curiosity. He could appear romantic without acting dominant, creating a form of masculinity that felt modern and uncertain. That difference allowed audiences and journalists to project questions onto him that studios preferred not to answer. After a severe automobile accident damaged his face, chronic pain and dependency affected his later career. Even this suffering became incorporated into a legend of personal destruction. Placing Clift in a countdown about supposed compulsive desire therefore requires caution. Unlike stars with several marriages or openly acknowledged affairs, his documented public record is limited. The myth rests heavily on what later writers believed he concealed. That secrecy did not necessarily result from shame. During his era, an actor's career could be damaged or destroyed by public knowledge of relationships that violated studio expectations. Privacy was professional protection. Clift's story is less about excessive behavior than excessive curiosity. Because he did not provide a simple official narrative, Hollywood filled the silence with speculation. His performances remain certain. Many claims about his private life do not. Number 16. James Dean. Only 3 major films were needed to create a legend that has lasted for generations. James Dean died at 24, leaving behind a brief career, unfinished ambitions, and enough unanswered questions for hundreds of stories to grow around him. His relationship with Italian actress Pier Angeli became the best-known romance associated with his lifetime. Later memoirs and biographies also discussed other emotional and intimate connections, including claims made by people who knew him personally. Because Dean died so young, he never had the opportunity to confirm, dispute, or place those accounts in context. The studios marketed him as rebellious, vulnerable, and dangerous. Audiences then assumed his private life must contain the same emotional chaos displayed in East of Eden and Rebel Without a Cause. But the surviving record is fragmented. Memories changed over decades, and association with Dean became valuable. Some witnesses had genuine knowledge, others benefited from keeping the mythology alive. Calling him a compulsive lover turns uncertainty into fact. Dean may have explored relationships in ways Hollywood could not discuss openly, yet experimentation by a young adult is not a clinical diagnosis. His enduring appeal rests partly on incompleteness. There was no middle age, no later interview, no memoir, and no quiet period in which the image could become ordinary. Every relationship remains suspended inside the legend of the doomed rebel, What people wanted from Dean often mattered more than what Dean himself wanted. That is why the truth remains difficult to separate from the desire of others to claim a piece of him. Number 15. Marlon Brando. Few actors spoke about their own appetites with such a mixture of honesty, performance, and provocation. Marlon Brando revolutionized screen acting, but his private life became almost as famous as A Streetcar Named Desire, On the Waterfront, and The Godfather. He married 3 times and fathered numerous children. His marriages to Ana Kashfi, Movida Castaneda, and Teresa Terriapaya unfolded alongside other relationships. In his autobiography, Brando acknowledged extensive infidelity and presented himself as someone who resisted conventional domestic restrictions. Former partners also described emotionally intense and sometimes damaging experiences. Rita Moreno, for example, later spoke publicly about their long relationship and the unequal power surrounding it. Such testimony complicates the playful legend of Brando as an irresistible man. Unlike women given the title's label, Brando was often celebrated for the same behavior. His reputation became evidence of masculinity, artistic rebellion, and power. Even destructive conduct could be absorbed into the mythology of the difficult male genius. Still, Brando's own storytelling requires caution. He enjoyed challenging interviewers and sometimes manipulated his image. A provocative statement could be sincere, exaggerated, or designed to end a conversation. The documented pattern of marriages, children, infidelity, and overlapping relationships makes him more relevant to this countdown than many names. Yet diagnosis remains impossible and unnecessary. The more important conclusion concerns permission. Hollywood allowed Brando to behave badly while remaining artistically important. Women with far smaller histories were frequently defined by scandal alone. Number 14. Tony Curtis. Charm was both his greatest professional weapon and a story he repeatedly told about himself. Tony Curtis rose from a difficult New York childhood to become one of Hollywood's most popular leading men, appearing in comedies, dramas, crime films, and epics. 6 marriages created a long public record. His first wife, Janet Leigh, formed one half of what studios promoted as a glamorous ideal couple. Their marriage produced daughters Kelly and Jamie Lee Curtis, but it eventually ended amid personal conflict and Curtis's relationships outside the union. Later memoirs included claims about famous women and behind-the-scenes encounters. Some stories were challenged, and the passage of time made verification difficult. Curtis possessed a performer's instinct, meaning that a private memory could become more dramatic each time it was repeated. What is not disputed is that infidelity affected his marriages. Curtis himself acknowledged behavior that caused pain, especially during the years when fame provided constant opportunity. The industry treated that record with a combination of amusement and admiration. A handsome male star with numerous relationships became a lovable rogue. An actress behaving similarly would have faced language suggesting corruption or illness. Curtis's later life involved addiction recovery, artistic work, family tension, and attempts to understand the damage created by earlier choices. That complexity is more revealing than a list of alleged partners. His career shows how celebrity can reward selfishness before age forces a person to confront its consequences. The stories may be entertaining, but the people affected by them experience something far less glamorous. Number 13. Sammy Davis Jr. One relationship became dangerous not because of private behavior, but because of America's racial prejudice. Sammy Davis Jr. was among the most versatile entertainers of his generation, capable of singing, dancing, acting, comedy, and astonishing impressions. Fame, however, did not protect him from discrimination. His relationship with actress Kim Novak attracted intense studio opposition during the 1950s. Columbia Pictures feared that public knowledge of an interracial romance would damage Novak's career and provoke backlash. Accounts describe pressure surrounding the relationship, showing how completely studios attempted to control personal lives. Davis later married Swedish actress May Britt. Their interracial marriage generated controversy, but also represented an open challenge to social restrictions. After that marriage ended, he married Altovise Gore, who remained his wife until his death. His fame and association with the Rat Pack produced countless stories about parties and relationships. Some were probably true. Others expanded as the group's mythology became commercially valuable. Davis lived rapidly and struggled with addiction, exhaustion, and the emotional demands of constant performance. Yet his private history should not be removed from the racial conditions surrounding it. Choices available to white stars could place him in professional or physical danger. The title's label therefore hides the most important part of his story. Davis did not merely cross romantic boundaries. He crossed barriers enforced by studios, segregation, and public hostility. His relationships became political, whether he intended them to or not. What gossip presented as appetite was sometimes a refusal to accept that other people had the right to decide whom he could love. Number 12. Desi Arnaz. America watched him argue and reconcile with Lucille Ball every week, unaware that the real marriage was becoming increasingly difficult. Desi Arnaz was a television pioneer whose production methods helped reshape the industry, but his personal behavior contributed to the collapse of one of entertainment's most famous partnerships. Arnaz and Ball married in 1940 after meeting during the production of Too Many Girls. Their relationship involved strong attraction, professional admiration, long separations, jealousy, and repeated conflict. Arnaz's infidelity and heavy drinking have been discussed in biographies and accounts of the marriage. Ball initially attempted to create greater stability by bringing Arnaz into the television project that became I Love Lucy. The series kept them working in the same location and turned their chemistry into a cultural phenomenon. Yet professional success could not permanently repair the private damage. They divorced in 1960, but remained connected through their children and the company they had built. Arnaz later married Edith Mack Hirsch, while Ball married Gary Morton. The mythology around Arnaz often presents his behavior with a smile. He was charming, musical, energetic, and supposedly unable to resist opportunity. That version ignores the emotional cost to Ball and the insecurity surrounding their family. At the same time, Arnaz should not be reduced only to infidelity. He helped establish the filmed multi-camera sitcom model, understood production ownership, and became one of television's most important executives. His story combines innovation and betrayal. The same confidence that allowed him to challenge broadcasting traditions could also become entitlement in private relationships. Number 11. Orson Welles. Genius provided an excuse that ordinary people rarely received. Orson Welles entered Hollywood after transforming radio and theater, then directed Citizen Kane while still in his 20s. His enormous personality attracted collaborators, enemies, and romantic partners with equal intensity. 3 marriages marked his life. He married Virginia Nicholson before becoming involved with actress Dolores Del Rio. His second marriage, to Rita Hayworth, united 2 major stars but struggled under separation, incompatible lifestyles, and Welles's infidelity. His third wife was actress Paula Mori, although he later maintained a long relationship with artist Oja Kodar. The pattern reflected a larger restlessness. Welles moved between countries, productions, unfinished films, financial problems, and relationships. He appeared to resist any situation that threatened to become ordinary. Hayworth later suggested that she entered the marriage partly hoping Welles would help her escape the manufactured image created by her studio. Instead, both individuals brought complicated needs into a union neither could stabilize. Biographies sometimes romanticize Welles's behavior as another expression of creative energy. That framing deserves scrutiny. Artistic brilliance does not erase dishonesty or the emotional consequences experienced by partners. Still, the word in the title offers little explanation. Welles's relationships involved ego, admiration, opportunity, loneliness, and his need to remain intellectually stimulated. Reducing all of that to physical appetite oversimplifies the person. He remains one of cinema's greatest innovators, but the heroic artist narrative should not prevent honest discussion of how his freedom depended on other people absorbing the disorder he left behind. Number 10. Howard Hughes. Money, aviation, secrecy, and movie star beauty combined to create one of Hollywood's most durable romantic legends. Howard Hughes was an industrialist, filmmaker, and aviator whose relationships with actresses became part of the mythology surrounding his power. Documented accounts connect him with stars including Hedy Lamarr and Bette Davis. His marriages included Ella Rice, actress Jean Peters, and Terry Moore's disputed claim of a secret union. Beyond those relationships, an enormous number of stories circulated about women supposedly recruited, housed, watched, or kept available through his organization. Not every story carries equal evidence. Hughes became so secretive that rumors could survive without confirmation. Later writers also understood that attaching another famous actress to his name made any biography more marketable. What is clear is that wealth allowed him to exercise a level of control unavailable to ordinary partners. Accounts describe surveillance, strict rules, private arrangements, and an intense desire to manage the lives of women who interested him. That behavior should not be confused with simple romantic success. Attraction combined with power can create relationships in which the less influential person has limited freedom. Hughes's later isolation also complicates the image of endless appetite. His health, obsessive behavior, and fear of contamination eventually separated him from ordinary contact. The young millionaire surrounded by actresses and the reclusive older man were not separate legends. They represented the same desire for control. Romance attracted public attention, but possession and secrecy may provide the more accurate explanation. Number 9. George Brent. A respectable screen image concealed one of classic Hollywood's most crowded romantic records. George Brent often played dependable professionals and mature leading men, creating the impression of stability. Away from the camera, his marriages and reported relationships told a different story. Sources count as many as 6 marriages, including unions with actresses Ruth Chatterton and Constance Worth. His relationship with Bette Davis became particularly famous because the pair worked together repeatedly and shared a connection that continued across several productions. Reports also linked Brent with other co-stars. The studio environment made such relationships easy to begin. Actors worked long hours in emotionally intense scenes, traveled together, and lived inside publicity systems that encouraged romantic chemistry while demanding private discretion. Brent never developed the dangerous reputation attached to actresses with similar histories. His screen personality protected him. He appeared calm, polite, and masculine, so multiple marriages became an interesting detail rather than a defining scandal. That difference demonstrates how appearance controlled judgment. A flamboyant woman could be labeled uncontrolled after 2 relationships. A reserved man might marry repeatedly and continue playing trustworthy heroes without audiences questioning the contradiction. Brent eventually withdrew from Hollywood and became less familiar to modern viewers than Davis or Chatterton. His private history therefore faded alongside his fame. Yet the surviving record makes him an important example. A person did not need a shocking public persona to maintain numerous romantic commitments. Sometimes the quietest leading man on the screen was living the most complicated story once the cameras stopped. Number 8. George Raft. Gangster roles gave him an image of danger, but his romantic life provided an equally dramatic reputation. George Raft brought authentic nightclub style and underworld mannerisms to Hollywood, becoming famous for characters who remained calm while trouble exploded around them. His legal marriage to Grace Mulrooney lasted for decades, although the couple separated early and never divorced. That unresolved marriage complicated later relationships because Raft could not freely remarry. Biographical accounts link him with several major actresses, including Carole Lombard, Betty Grable, and Norma Shearer. Some connections were more serious than others, but together they established a pattern that Hollywood insiders recognized even when the public record remained carefully managed. Raft's underworld friendships increased the mystery. Newspapers and later writers often combined his romantic stories with tales of gambling, nightclubs, and organized crime figures, creating a character who seemed to live permanently outside conventional rules. Unlike a female star in the same situation, Raft was rarely described as medically abnormal. His affairs strengthened the tough guy identity. Romantic access became another sign that he was powerful and desirable. The longest relationship in his life may have been the marriage he could neither restore nor legally escape. That contradiction complicates the simple womanizer narrative. Raft pursued other companions while remaining technically tied to a wife from his youth. His story shows how legal restriction, personal loyalty, fame, and opportunity can create a pattern that looks simple from a distance, but becomes far more confusing when examined closely. The reputation was real. The motivations remain less certain. Number 7. Tyrone Power. Few leading men appeared more perfectly designed for romantic adventure. Tyrone Power's beauty, voice, and elegance made him a natural choice for swashbucklers and costume dramas. The studio sold him as an ideal lover, while his private relationships created difficulties the publicity department could not always hide. Power married 3 times: French actress Annabella, actress Linda Christian, and Deborah Minardos. His first marriage reportedly displeased studio executives, who feared that a married romantic idol would become less attractive to audiences. During that marriage, Power formed a serious relationship with Lana Turner, who was also navigating her own commitments. Turner later described the affair as emotionally significant. The relationship did not result in marriage, and both continued through other complicated chapters. Stories concerning Power's private life expanded after his death. Some later writers made claims about relationships that remained debated, especially because the studio system encouraged secrecy. and many alleged witnesses spoke decades afterward. What is established is enough to reveal a man struggling between romantic intensity, career demands, wartime service, and the desire for stability. He could make commitments and then become emotionally attached elsewhere. Power's appearance softened public judgment. Newspapers described him as charming and irresistible rather than uncontrolled. The same pattern assigned to an actress might have been presented as moral collapse. His life ended suddenly during the filming of Solomon and Sheba in 1958. At 44, he left behind 3 marriages, children, celebrated performances, and a private mythology that remained unfinished, allowing admirers and gossip writers to shape it for him. Number 6. Spencer Tracy. One of Hollywood's most famous love stories existed in the shadow of a marriage that never legally ended. Spencer Tracy married Louise Treadwell in 1923, and although they lived separately for long periods, he remained married to her until his death. During the production of Woman of the Year, Tracy began a relationship with Katharine Hepburn. The connection lasted approximately 25 years and continued across 9 films. It was known within Hollywood but never publicly confirmed by the couple during Tracy's lifetime. Religion, family obligation, public image, and concern for his wife influenced the secrecy. Hepburn accepted a relationship that could not become a conventional marriage, while Tracy moved between emotional worlds without fully leaving either one. This is not a history of numerous documented affairs. It is the story of one enduring relationship that existed alongside a legal marriage. That distinction makes Tracy's inclusion useful because popular culture often places every unconventional arrangement under the same sensational label. His behavior caused pain and required secrecy, but it does not demonstrate endless desire. The central issue was divided loyalty. Tracy loved Hepburn while maintaining responsibility toward a wife and family he would not publicly abandon. Hollywood romanticized the arrangement after both stars were gone, presenting it as tragic devotion. Louise Treadwell's experience received far less attention. That imbalance matters. A secret relationship can appear beautiful when remembered through famous films, but someone outside the celebrated couple may bear the cost. Tracy's story is not about quantity. It is about the complicated moral consequences of refusing to make a final choice. Number 5. Gary Cooper. The quiet hero audiences trusted on screen maintained a far less settled romantic life away from it. Gary Cooper became famous for understatement, integrity, and characters who seemed uncomfortable with dishonesty. His private record, however, included several relationships before and during marriage. Early Hollywood associations connected him with Clara Bow and Lupe Velez. He also worked closely with Marlene Dietrich, Carole Lombard, and other major actresses whose names appeared in accounts of his romantic history. Cooper married Veronica Balfe in 1933, and the marriage lasted until his death despite a lengthy separation. During that period, his relationship with actress Patricia Neal became particularly serious. Neal later spoke publicly about the affair and the emotional pain surrounding its end. The conflict between Cooper's screen morality and private behavior did not destroy his career. Audiences continued viewing him as fundamentally honorable. His restrained image made infidelity appear like personal weakness rather than evidence of a corrupted identity. That protection was rarely available to women. Clara Bow's relationships became proof that she was scandalous. Cooper's similar history became another feature of masculine charm. Later in life, he reconciled with his wife and converted to Catholicism. Those developments suggest a man confronting choices and seeking stability, rather than someone permanently ruled by appetite. Cooper's record remains important because it exposes how performance influences moral judgment. He looked trustworthy, spoke softly, and played heroes. As a result, Hollywood separated the actor's private contradictions from the characters audiences loved. Many actresses were never granted that separation. Number 4. Frank Sinatra. Songs of Heartbreak sounded especially convincing because Frank Sinatra's private life repeatedly supplied the emotion. His career moved through extraordinary rises, humiliating declines, and spectacular comebacks, while 4 marriages kept his romantic history in public view. His first marriage to Nancy Barbato began before superstardom. As fame increased, infidelity and separation damaged the union. His relationship with Ava Gardner became an international obsession and contributed to the end of the marriage. Sinatra and Gardner married in 1951, creating one of Hollywood's most volatile partnerships. Their attraction was intense, but jealousy, career pressure, separation, and mutual affairs made stability difficult. Even after divorce, emotional attachment reportedly continued. He later married Mia Farrow, despite a large age difference. then Barbara Marx, who remained with him until his death. Other relationships and alleged encounters filled biographies, although individual claims required different levels of caution. Sinatra's behavior was frequently presented as part of the Rat Pack lifestyle: nightclubs, drinking, gambling, beautiful companions, and complete confidence. The image could appear glamorous, but people close to him experienced anger, absence, and betrayal. Still, his romantic history cannot be reduced to appetite. Sinatra seemed deeply affected by rejection and loss. His relationship with Gardner, in particular, appears to have combined obsession, vulnerability, and emotional dependence. He could command a stage yet struggle when another person refused to be controlled. The songs allowed him to express tenderness that everyday pride often concealed. Sinatra's private life became dramatic because love was never casual, once his ego, fame, and fear of abandonment entered the room. Number 3. Clark Gable. The title King of Hollywood carried privileges few performers could imagine. Clark Gable became the industry's ideal masculine star: confident, humorous, physical, and apparently irresistible. His 5 marriages and several relationships only strengthened that public identity. One of the most important affairs involved Joan Crawford. Their on-screen chemistry developed into an off-screen connection that continued in different forms, while studio executives attempted to manage the consequences. Because both were valuable MGM properties, publicity required careful control. Gable later married Carole Lombard after a relationship that began while his divorce from Maria Langham remained unresolved. The marriage became the defining romance of his life. Lombard's death in 1942 devastated him, and admirers later interpreted every subsequent relationship through the grief he carried. He married twice more, first to Sylvia Ashley, and finally to Kay Williams. His private history also includes the long-disputed circumstances surrounding actress Loretta Young and their daughter Judy Lewis, a subject later accounts treated with increasing seriousness and concern. Gable's romantic reputation was rarely used to diminish his professional standing. Instead, it confirmed that he deserved the crown. Multiple marriages made him experienced. Affairs made him powerful. Women were described as unable to resist him. That language removed responsibility and transformed complicated choices into proof of masculinity. The same culture that punished Bergman and Beau celebrated Gable. His grief for Lombard was real, but so were the people affected by his other decisions. King was not merely a nickname, it represented a system in which fame protected a man from judgments routinely directed at women around him. Number 2. Errol Flynn. No actor worked harder to turn private scandal into a permanent brand. Errol Flynn became the perfect swashbuckling hero in films such as Captain Blood and The Adventures of Robin Hood. Off-screen, he encouraged the image of a restless adventurer who treated ordinary rules as obstacles. 3 marriages formed the official record: actresses Lily Damita, Nora Eddington, and Patrice Wymore. Numerous affairs and relationships were reported throughout his career, although later biographies sometimes repeated stories whose evidence ranged from strong to extremely questionable. A sensational 1940s trial intensified the legend. Flynn was acquitted of criminal charges, but the publicity connected his name permanently with reckless behavior. Instead of destroying his career, the scandal contributed to a phrase suggesting that someone could escape consequences through charm. Flynn later wrote an autobiography filled with adventure and provocative claims. Like many celebrity memoirs, it combined recollection, performance, self-protection, and entertainment. Treating every scene as verified history would be careless. What is clear is that alcohol, poor decisions, financial problems, and declining health damaged his final years. The charming rebel image concealed a darker pattern of self-destruction and harm to others. Hollywood often presented Flynn's behavior as irresistible comedy. Women became nameless evidence of his appeal, while the emotional and ethical consequences disappeared from the story. His ranking near the top reflects the scale of his documented reputation and the degree to which he helped create it. Yet even here, the outdated diagnosis adds little. Entitlement, opportunity, addiction, publicity, and a belief that charm could erase responsibility provide far more useful explanations. Number 1. Charlie Chaplin. The world's most beloved silent clown maintained a private history that remains deeply uncomfortable to examine. Charlie Chaplin created The Little Tramp, built extraordinary creative independence, and became one of cinema's foundational artists. His relationships, however, repeatedly involved very young women and major differences in age and power. Chaplin married 4 times. His first wife, Mildred Harris, was a teenager when they married. Lita Gray was also very young when their relationship began, and later became his second wife. Their divorce produced damaging allegations and enormous publicity. Paulette Goddard, his third wife, was an actress with a more independent career, while Una O'Neill became his fourth wife when she was 18 and he was 54. Chaplin and Una remained married for decades and had 8 children. The longevity of that union does not erase the troubling pattern visible in earlier relationships. His fame, wealth, and control over productions created an enormous power imbalance. Young actresses entering his professional circle could depend on decisions he made about employment and opportunity. That context matters more than simply counting marriages. Political controversy, legal battles, moral campaigns, and hostility toward his views eventually contributed to Chaplin leaving the United States. Some attacks were opportunistic, but criticism of his relationships cannot be dismissed entirely as persecution. Placing him at number 1 does not mean diagnosing him. It recognizes a repeatedly documented pattern involving youth, authority, secrecy, and unequal power. Unlike exaggerated stories surrounding Clara Bow or Marilyn Monroe, much of Chaplin's marital record is publicly established. His artistic achievements changed cinema forever. Honest history must hold that achievement beside the harm and ethical questions in his private life, rather than allowing genius to erase accountability. So, were these 45 stars truly controlled by endless desire? In most cases, the evidence says something far more complicated. Some were unfaithful, some pursued turbulent marriages, some abused their power, and others were victims of gossip created to destroy them. Hollywood sold desire, rewarded powerful men for displaying it, and punished women for appearing to possess it. Subscribe, share your thoughts respectfully, and remember, the most shocking legend is not always the most truthful one.